cold, unforgiving void between stars, aboard the interstellar research vessel Ether's Veil, Dr. Vexlor Ktharn had witnessed every conceivable horror the galaxy could inflict upon mortal flesh. As a Vexari, his species had long transcended the need for sleep. Their minds burned with eternal vigilance, processing vast streams of data without interruption. Their bodies operated in seamless, continuous microcycles of regeneration, healing and renewing even as they worked. To the Vexari, consciousness was not merely a state of being, it was sacred, unbreakable, eternal, a divine spark that defined their superiority among the stars. So when Dr. Vexlor first witnessed the unthinkable happening to his human crewmate, Engineer Marcus Hale, he was convinced he was watching a slow, agonizing murder unfold in real time. It began during the designated night cycle aboard the station. The engineering deck's lights had dimmed to a soft, ambient glow, casting long, eerie shadows across banks of humming consoles and exposed circuitry. Vexlor entered for a routine systems diagnostic, his 6 tentacles gliding silently over the deck plating. What he found froze him mid-motion. Marcus sat slumped in his reinforced chair, head lolled back at an unnatural angle, mouth slightly agape. His vital monitors, carefully patched into the universal medical grid, erupted into chaos. Heart rate plummeting. Brain activity flatlining into erratic theta waves. Muscle paralysis spreading rapidly through his limbs. Oxygen saturation levels dipping dangerously low. Vexlor's multiple eyes widened in pure, visceral alien terror. His chromatophores flushed with stress pigments. Medical emergency, he roared into his comms, the translator converting his guttural hiss into urgent galactic standard. 6 tentacles moved with blinding speed, slamming emergency protocols into action. Force fields snapped into existence around the human's form. Revival stims were prepped and primed. Neural stabilizers hummed to life. The human's eyes remained closed. Completely unresponsive. A lifeless shell. Vexlor's 3 hearts thundered in his chest. He's dying. Right in front of me. The thought repeated like a malfunctioning loop. He had studied human biology extensively during the long journey out from the core worlds. Humans were resilient. Adaptable. Ingenious survivors who had clawed their way to interstellar relevance despite their fragile physiology. But this? This was systemic collapse. A total, horrifying shutdown, the kind of cascading failure that preceded death in nearly every known sentient species. By the time the emergency response team burst through the doors, 2 additional Vexari medtechs and a stoic, 4-armed droll engineer, Vexlor had already administered 3 broad-spectrum countertoxins and was calibrating neural jolts that could restart a dying nervous system. Then, without warning, Marcus stirred. He blinked slowly, stretched, and let out a deep yawn. His gaze settled on the cluster of panicked aliens surrounding him with medical scanners, hyposprays, and containment fields. A lazy grin spread across his stubbled face. "Whoa, Doc. Rough night?" Marcus asked casually, rubbing his jaw as if he'd merely dozed off during a boring shift. Vexlor's skin flared a violent crimson. "Night? You were dying. I watched your life signs flatline across every metric. Your brain activity nearly ceased entirely. Explain this. This nightly death ritual at once, human." Marcus chuckled, the sound far too relaxed for someone who had just clawed his way back from what appeared to be clinical death. "Doc, that's just sleep. I told you about it last week, remember?" Sleep. Vexlor's tentacles coiled like striking serpents, twitching with agitation. "You dare call this sleep? Your body betrays you every 24 hours. It systematically shuts down vital organs. You become utterly vulnerable, prey for any predator that might pass by. How are your kind not extinct? How have you survived long enough to reach the stars?" The tension in the medbay thickened like nebula gas. Vexlor's multiple minds raced through 1,000 nightmare scenarios at once. What if this so-called sleep was actually a parasitic affliction? A hidden flaw that could doom the entire crew when they entered the volatile Kronos Nebula ahead? Solar flares and gravitational anomalies already threatened the station daily. One lapse during this death state could prove fatal. Marcus leaned back in his chair, sipping from a mug of synth coffee as though nothing extraordinary had occurred. It's not death, Vex. It's maintenance. Repair. You Vexery run hot 24/7. We power down and rebuild ourselves. Come back sharper. But Dr. Vexlork Tharn was far from convinced. In his species' ancient, unbroken history of eternal wakefulness, nothing like this existed. And as the ether's veil hurtled toward the chaotic Kronos Nebula, the alien medic made a solemn vow deep within his triple hearts. He would save Marcus Hale from himself, even if the stubborn human fought him every single step of the way. Dr. Vexlork Tharn refused to let death claim his crewmate again. For 3 full station cycles straight, he became Marcus Hale's unrelenting shadow, a towering, multi-limbed specter of alien determination. Every time the human's eyelids grew heavy or his movements slowed, Vexlor was there, injecting low-dose stimulants directly into the neck, running continuous neural scans, even rigging the environmental controls to flood the engineering deck with mild wakefulness-inducing gases that made the air taste metallic and sharp. You cannot keep doing this, Vexlor hissed during their second major confrontation. Marcus had just dozed off at his primary console, nearly missing a critical power fluctuation that could have overloaded the starboard relays. The human's eyes snapped open, bloodshot and rimmed with exhaustion. "Doc, you're killing me with these stims," Marcus growled, his hands trembling visibly as he tried to steady them. "My heart feels like it's going to explode. I need rest. Real rest. Rest is death." Vexlor slammed a powerful tentacle against the console, making data holograms flicker and dance between them. Detailed human brain scans rotated in the air, slow delta waves dominating the terrifying pattern the Vexery now called the slow death state. "Look at this evidence," the medic continued, voice rising with frustration. "Your higher cognitive functions vanish. Memory consolidation? A comforting lie your species tells itself. You become completely vulnerable. What if an enemy boarding party breached the hull during one of these collapses? What if the nebula storm hits at that exact moment?" Marcus rubbed his temples, jaw clenched tight with growing tension. The station hummed around them, but a deeper undercurrent of danger vibrated through the hull, distant rumbles from the Kronos Nebula's edge growing stronger by the hour. Gravitational anomalies tugged at the superstructure like invisible claws. "Listen to me, Vex," Marcus said, his voice low and deadly serious for the first time. "We evolved this way over hundreds of thousands of years. Sleep clears metabolic toxins, strengthens neural pathways, rebuilds the body at a cellular level. Without it, we break down." Humans survived ice ages, world wars, pandemics, and deep space expeditions precisely because we know when to shut down and come back stronger. Vexlor's multiple pupils narrowed into razor slits. "Primitive superstition. I have reviewed every scrap of your species' history. Your kind fought battles while exhausted, made catastrophic mistakes, lost millions of lives unnecessarily. I will not allow such needless risk on my watch aboard the Ether's Veil." That station night, Dr. Vexlor took drastic, irreversible action. Under the cover of dimmed lighting, he disabled the sleep regulators in Marcus's private quarters. He overrode environmental protocols and flooded the air with calibrated stimulants designed to suppress fatigue receptors. Then he stood guard outside the door with a full array of monitoring equipment, his 3 hearts steady, his eternal consciousness whirring through endless calculations and contingency plans. At precisely 3 o'clock station time, Marcus stumbled out into the corridor, pale, disheveled, and furious. Dark circles had already begun forming beneath his eyes. "This ends now, Doc," he snarled. "You're crossing a serious line." The argument exploded through the corridors. Raised voices echoed off bulkheads. Other crew members paused their duties to watch warily. A towering Drool security officer muttered under his breath, "The human looks wrong. Unstable." But Vexlor stood firm, tentacles rigid with conviction. "I am saving your life, Marcus Hale. One day you will thank me when you no longer need to die every cycle like some primitive biological machine." The human's laugh was bitter and edged with raw fatigue. You're going to regret this. Mark my words. As the Kronos Nebula's first major flare slammed into the station's shields, systems began glitching across multiple decks. Power surges rippled through conduits. Communication blackouts lasted minutes at a time. And Marcus, pushed far beyond his natural limits by the forced wakefulness, began displaying the early warning signs Vexlor had secretly feared. Not the peaceful, controlled sleep death he had witnessed before. This was something far more terrifying. Subtle tremors appeared in the engineer's once steady hands. Hallucinations flickered at the edges of his vision, shadowy shapes that made him flinch. Slow cognitive failure crept in, delayed responses, forgotten command sequences, simple calculations taking twice as long. Dr. Vexlor watched the medical readings with growing dread, his chromatophores shifting through uneasy shades of violet. Had his well-intentioned intervention accelerated the very collapse he sought to prevent? Warning klaxons began to blare as the nebula storm intensified. The ether's veil groaned under increasing gravitational shear. Tension thickened the air like ozone before a lightning strike. Their best engineer was unraveling. And the worst of the storm was still coming. The ether's veil station shuddered violently under the Kronos Nebula's growing fury. Gravitational shear waves tore at the outer hull like invisible claws, sending deep metallic groans echoing through every deck. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut with thunderous booms. Warning sirens wailed in overlapping dissonance. And still, Dr. Vexlor Tharn refused to yield an inch. Engineer Marcus Hale was deteriorating visibly now. His once steady hands fumbled with basic tools, dropping a plasma welder twice in under a minute. His legendary intuitive mind, known across the crew for brilliant, creative leaps, stuttered on the simplest calculations. Dark, bruise-like circles had carved deep canyons beneath his bloodshot eyes. His skin looked pale and clammy under the harsh emergency lights. "You see," Vexlor declared triumphantly during a forced medical exam in the main engineering bay. His multiple tentacles held up glowing holographic scans. "Without my intervention, this nightly death ritual would have already claimed you. I have proven that continuous wakefulness is the superior, proven nothing." Marcus snapped, yanking his arm away from the scanner with surprising force. His voice cracked with exhaustion-fueled rage. "You've turned my natural repair time into pure torture, Doc. I'm running on fumes. My body is screaming for rest. Real death is coming if you don't let me sleep soon." Tension crackled between them like live plasma conduits. The station's AI voice cut through the chaos, warning. Critical failures detected in main reactor cooling systems. Manual recalibration required within 12 minutes or cascade meltdown imminent. Other crew members watched the heated standoff from nearby stations. Some Vexery whispered that the human was clearly weak and flawed. A Drool engineer shook his head, sensing something deeper at play. Vexlor projected larger holographic brain scans into the air between them, the images pulsing with ominous red data overlays. "Look at these anomalies," the alien medic insisted. "Your species clings to this biological flaw generation after generation. Why? Explain it so my three minds can finally accept this madness." Marcus leaned heavily against a reinforced bulkhead, his breathing ragged and labored. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the climate controls. "Because fighting it is worse, Vex. Sleep isn't surrender, it's strategy. The brain prunes junk data, consolidates years of memories, repairs damaged tissue at the cellular level. We wake up reborn. Sharper. Faster. You Vexery burn bright and steady every hour of every cycle. We explode with brilliance after the dark. That's how we've survived everything the universe has thrown at us." Vexlor recoiled slightly, his chromatophores flickering with uncertainty. Poetry. Not science. But for the first time, a tiny seed of doubt crept into his eternal consciousness. A flicker. A crack in absolute certainty. Then the real crisis exploded without mercy. A massive solar flare slammed into the station's forward shields. The impact rocked the entire vessel. Alarms screamed louder as shields buckled under the onslaught. Reactor coolant lines ruptured in a violent spray of superheated liquid. Radiation levels spiked dangerously in the engineering section. Crew members shouted over comms as system failures began cascading toward total meltdown. Marcus tried to sprint toward his primary command console. His legs nearly buckled beneath him. Vexlor caught him with two powerful tentacles. "See, you are compromised beyond repair," the medic cried, voice laced with vindication and growing fear. But Marcus shoved him off with raw, desperate strength. "Get out of my way. People will die if I don't fix this now." He stumbled into the heart of the engineering chaos. Sparks rained down like fiery hail from overloaded panels. Thick smoke curled through the air. Alarms screamed in a deafening symphony. The human worked through sheer willpower alone, rerouting power couplings with trembling hands, sealing leaks while fighting waves of dizziness. Vexlor assisted frantically, his 6 tentacles flying across controls, but his mind raced with mounting horror. This was not the orderly, controlled shutdown he had witnessed before. This was a slow, agonizing, chaotic breakdown of a biological machine pushed past every limit. The human was driving himself toward true death. Suspense peaked as the reactor temperature climbed rapidly past all safety thresholds. One wrong move, one delayed command, and the entire station would vaporize in a blinding flash. Marcus's vision blurred. He muttered errors under his breath. Time seemed to slow in agonizing dramatic tension as the nebula storm raged mercilessly outside. "Evacuate non-essential personnel," the station AI blared repeatedly, its calm synthetic voice cutting through the deafening roar of alarms. Fires raged unchecked in auxiliary systems, filling corridors with thick black smoke. The hull groaned and screeched under impossible gravitational stresses from the Kronos Nebula, as if the station itself were crying out in pain. Marcus Hale had become a ghost of his former self, sweat-soaked, pale as death, moving forward on pure instinct and fading willpower alone. Dr. Vexlor Tharn worked frantically beside him, 6 tentacles blurring across control panels, but his focus was dangerously split between the escalating crisis and the human's rapidly failing vitals. Every scan screamed danger. "You're collapsing," Vexlor shouted over the thunderous roar of explosions and venting atmosphere. "This is exactly what I feared, your fragile biology betraying you at the worst possible moment." Marcus didn't answer. He had already dropped to his knees and crawled into a narrow, hazardous access tunnel, rerouting failing coolant conduits with shaking hands. His breathing came in short, desperate gasps. Hallucinations whispered cruelly at the edges of his vision, shadowy figures of past failures, lost comrades from earlier missions, and flickering ghosts warning him he was too late. A live sparking panel nearly electrocuted him. Vexlor's tentacles shot forward, yanking the human back just in time. "Enough," the medic roared, voice thick with dawning horror. "This is true systemic failure, not your so-called sleep. I was wrong to fear the controlled state. This exhaustion is the real monster." But Marcus fought on with stubborn, desperate strength. "Can't. Stop now," he rasped, voice hoarse and cracking. "Stabilize the core. Or we all die." Dramatic close calls mounted with merciless intensity. A massive bulkhead door began crushing shut nearby, nearly trapping them both. Radiation warnings screamed as lethal levels spiked across the deck. A secondary explosion ripped through an adjacent conduit, the blast wave throwing both of them violently across the deck plating. Marcus's head struck a sharp metal support beam with a sickening crack. Dark blood trickled down his temple. Vexlor's 3 hearts nearly stopped in terror. The human lay deathly still for several terrifying seconds, body limp amid the raining sparks and chaos. Time seemed to freeze. Then Marcus groaned, a low, pained sound, and forced himself upright. Bloodied. Broken. Vision swimming. But unyielding. The tension was unbearable. Crew reports flooded the comms in panic bursts, multiple casualties on lower decks, failing life support in sectors 7 through 9, and rising fatalities. The nebula storm showed no signs of abating. Massive flares continued hammering the weakened shields. This was the moment that tested everything the crew, and their unlikely friendship, had been built upon. Working side by side in the heart of the inferno, Vexlor finally understood the critical difference streaming through his real-time data overlays. The nightly death he had witnessed was orderly, peaceful, purposeful, a restorative ritual. This current state of total exhaustion was chaotic violence against the body and mind, destructive, wasteful, and deadly. "You were right," the alien whispered, his usually commanding voice breaking every professional protocol. Stress pigments rippled across his skin in waves of deep indigo regret. "I have endangered you. And the entire crew." Marcus collapsed heavily against the main reactor console, barely conscious, his blood staining the controls. His words came out as a broken plea. "Then. Let me fix this. Let me sleep, Doc. Just one cycle. Please." The decision hung precariously in the balance. Alarms wailed louder than ever. The reactor core temperature teetered on the edge of catastrophic explosion, warning holograms flashing blood red across every surface. Lives, dozens of them, depended on what Vexlor chose in the next few seconds. For the first time since the incident began, the Vexery medics' eternal, tireless minds fell silent. All calculations, all logic, all fear of the unknown pointed toward one inescapable truth. He had been wrong. Vexlor made the call that would change everything between them. Medical override. Dr. Vexlor Tharn declared, his voice cutting through the deafening chaos like a blade. Ignoring the protests crackling over the comms from other crew members, he wrapped two powerful tentacles around Marcus's exhausted frame and dragged the near-unconscious human toward the nearest reinforced emergency medical pod. The station shook violently around them as another gravitational surge slammed into the hull. "Vex. What are you?" Marcus rasped weakly, trying to resist. "Quiet. Human. This is my decision now." Force fields snapped into place around the pod with a resonant hum. Vexlor carefully positioned Marcus inside the padded interior, his multiple eyes scanning the engineer's failing vitals one final time. With trembling precision, he administered gentle sedatives, not the harsh stimulants he had forced upon him earlier, but soothing compounds designed to ease the body into its natural restorative state. "Sleep, Marcus Hale," the alien medic whispered, voice thick with regret. "Embrace your death ritual. I will guard you with my life." The human's bloodshot eyes fluttered shut. Within minutes, the terrifying yet now familiar collapse began playing out across the monitors, heart rate dropping steadily, brain activity shifting from frantic gamma waves into the slower, deeper restorative patterns of delta and theta. But this time, Dr. Vexlor watched with entirely new eyes. Not with horror or disgust, but with cautious hope and dawning respect. Outside the sealed pod, the ether's veil descended into absolute pandemonium. Secondary systems failed in rapid succession. A catastrophic hull breach tore open on the port side, explosive decompression screaming through the affected decks. Crew members fought desperately against spreading fires and lethal radiation leaks. Comm channels overflowed with frantic reports and cries for help. Vexlor worked tirelessly, his continuous Vexery consciousness pushed to limits he had never experienced before. 6 tentacles flew across multiple control interfaces simultaneously. He coordinated repair teams, rerouted emergency power, and stabilized failing life support systems. Yet despite his tireless precision and vast logical processing power, critical solutions continued to evade him. Vexery logic was flawless but rigid. It lacked the creative, intuitive leaps that came so naturally to a well-rested human mind. Hours dragged by in agonizing suspense. The Kronos Nebula's storm raged without mercy outside, massive energy flares hammering the weakening shields. Life support flickered intermittently across entire sections. Dark whispers spread among the surviving crew, "The human is gone. We are doomed." Vexlor never left his vigil. He stood guard beside the medical pod, tentacles coiled protectively around the monitoring equipment. His chromatophores shifted through deep shades of worried purple and reflective blue. "Come back stronger," he murmured repeatedly, almost like a prayer. "Prove to me that your species' madness is its greatest strength. Show me I was wrong." Inside the pod, Marcus Hale slept the deep, healing sleep his body had been desperately craving. Metabolic toxins were flushed from his bloodstream.
Neural pathways rebuilt and strengthened. Damaged tissues repaired.
The ancient death ritual performed its quiet, powerful magic, consolidating memories, pruning unnecessary neural noise, and restoring a mind pushed far beyond its breaking point. Dramatic cuts showed the station's dire condition, failing reactors glowing cherry red, emergency bulkheads straining, crew members evacuating smoke-filled corridors. A final, monstrous flare from the nebula threatened total annihilation, its energy visibly cracking across the forward shields. Vexlor prepared for the end, all three hearts heavy with the weight of his mistake. He had nearly killed the one being who might have saved them all. Then, with a soft hydraulic hiss, the pod door opened. Marcus Hale stepped out, transformed. His eyes were clear and sharp. His movements were precise and energetic once more. The exhaustion had vanished, replaced by a focused, radiant vitality that seemed to light up the dim emergency lighting around him. "What happened while I was out?" he asked, voice steady and commanding, already moving toward the main engineering console. Vexlor stared in open awe, multiple eyes wide with disbelief. "Everything. We are on the absolute brink, Marcus." The human didn't waste a single second. He dove into the crisis with unmatched clarity and brilliance. His fingers flew across the holographic interfaces. Insights poured forth, elegant, creative solutions that no amount of Vexery processing power had predicted. With renewed authority, he stabilized the overheating reactor through a daring reroute, sealed the massive hull breach using improvised shielding arrays, and directed the scattered crews with crisp, decisive orders. The station groaned, shuddered, then finally began to steady. As the Kronos Nebula's apocalyptic fury finally ebbed, the Ether's Veil station emerged battered but unbroken against impossible odds. The massive energy flares dissipated into harmless cosmic dust. Gravitational shear waves faded into gentle ripples. Cheers erupted through every deck, raw, exhausted, and joyous. Crew members from a dozen species embraced in the corridors, tentacles wrapping around scaled shoulders, claws clapping against armored backs. For the first time in days, laughter echoed where screams had once dominated. Dr. Vexlor Tharn stood beside Engineer Marcus Hale on the expansive observation deck, overlooking the now calming starfield. The nebula's violent colors had softened into beautiful, swirling purples and deep indigos. The two unlikely comrades stood in contemplative silence for a long moment, the weight of everything that had transpired hanging between them. "I watched you die," the Vexery medic said quietly, his voice stripped of its usual clinical authority. "Not once, but over and over in my mind. I watched your life signs collapse. I saw what I believed was the end. And yet, I watched you return greater than before. Stronger. Clearer. My species never experiences this cycle of rebirth. We simply endure, endless, unbroken, tireless. You humans. You transcend." Marcus smiled wearily but warmly, the fresh color already returning to his face. Small bruises and the cut on his temple were now cleanly bandaged. He leaned against the reinforced viewport, gazing out at the stars that had nearly claimed them all. "That's why we're still alive, Doc. Out of all the species that reach the stars, we learned the hardest lesson long ago. Sometimes you have to let go completely to come back fighting. Sleep isn't weakness. It's not surrender. It's the secret to our resilience. A nightly reset that lets us face each new day sharper, more creative, and more alive than before." Vexlor's skin shifted from stressed violets into calm, serene blues and gentle teals. His multiple eyes softened as he processed the profound truth he had fought so hard to deny. "I owe you a deep apology, Engineer Marcus Hale. Not just for the harm I caused you, but for my arrogance. I nearly destroyed the very thing that saved us. Perhaps this will birth an entirely new field of study. Human sleep cycles. The controlled death that fuels extraordinary life." Marcus chuckled and reached out, clapping one of the alien's thick tentacles in a firm, brotherly grip. "Just promise me no more stims in my coffee. And maybe turn down the wakefulness gas to something less murderous." Laughter, genuine and relieved, broke the remaining tension between them. Other crew members nearby joined in, the sound spreading like a wave of healing across the observation deck. The camera slowly pulls back as the station gleams once more, hull repairs completed, lights shining brightly against the cosmic backdrop. Repair drones swarm gracefully over the scarred exterior. In the end, the galaxy learned a profound truth on that fateful day aboard the Ether's Veil. Humanity's greatest power was never superior technology, overwhelming firepower, or brute strength. It was the quiet courage to embrace nightly surrender, to trust in the ancient rhythm of death and rebirth, and to emerge each dawn armed with fresh ingenuity, creativity, and resilience that no continuously conscious mind could ever match. Later, in the quiet of his private quarters, Dr. Vexlork Tharn filed his official report to the Interspecies Medical Council. His multiple tentacles moved with thoughtful precision across the holographic interface. Recommendation: all mixed-species crews must fully accommodate human sleep protocols without exception. What we once viewed as a flaw is, in reality, their greatest evolutionary advantage. A strategic advantage we would be wise to study, respect, and protect. Because in a universe that never rests, the species that masters the art of controlled death will always rise to meet any challenge. Humanity doesn't just survive the dark. It rests within it. It heals. And then, it conquers. Subscribe.